Welcome to Mindful Biology. This video is the first of 5 that will cover the topic mortality. We all know we're going to die someday, but that's a fact we often avoid. This video series is meant to provide an opportunity for us to explore the topic from a few different angles. My goal isn't to answer important questions. Rather, I'm hoping to inspire inquiry. I further hope that this inquiry will increase our comfort with the natural and inevitable fact of our dying. As I was planning this series about mortality, I realized there were many topics that could be included. In making decisions about what to keep in and what to leave out, I've been guided by the idea that the more comfortable we are with death, the more comfortable we'll be with life. This idea is captured quite well by Lily Pincus, where she writes, "Ignorance and fear of death overshadow life, while knowing and accepting death erases this shadow." Of course, in our daily lives, our tendency is not to look closely at death and examine how it might motivate us to live more fully. We're actually encouraged to avoid talking about death and perhaps avoid thinking about it. This series will be an opportunity to turn our gaze back toward the fact of our mortality. There will be 5 videos in the series. This first one will look briefly at the presence of death, or one might say the omnipresence of it in our daily lives. The next video will look at why we die, particularly from a biological perspective. The final 3 videos will look at the time before, the time of transition, and the time after we are actively dying. Focusing today on the presence of death in our lives, it's worth remembering that the traditional wedding vow that all of us have heard includes the phrase, "till death do us part." So even in the midst of this life-affirming celebration, death is present. I highly recommend this book, The 5 Invitations, by Frank Ostaseski, who helped found the Zen Hospice in San Francisco. His subtitle is particularly appropriate for our purposes, Discovering What Death Can Teach Us About Living Fully. That's my aim in this series of videos. Right now, you are living with a fully alive and vibrant human body. No matter your state of health, your heart and lungs are working well enough for you to be here watching this video. So your lungs are taking in the air from the surrounding atmosphere, extracting oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. The heart is circulating all the blood in your body through those lungs so that the blood can get oxygenated and it can release the waste gas that we call carbon dioxide, which is actually a very helpful gas to living plants. In taking in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide, we are sharing a living function with all complex animals, whether they are birds or insects or mollusks or whales or anything else. We share something else with all these animals, and that is the capacity, in fact, the inevitability of dying. In the wild, many animals succumb to predation before they die of old age, but all animals, sooner or later, will die. and we are no exception. In fact, death is going on right now in our bodies. The cells of our bodies have programs inside them so that many of them undergo an automatic cell death when they receive appropriate signals. These two frames show normal living cells above and cells that have undergone a self-destruction process and are in various stages of bursting in the lower frame. So death is not only something that our bodies will inevitably do, it's something that's happening right now. So death is really central to biological life. We'll see in the next video that there are some exceptions to this. At least there are some exceptions in that some animals do not die of old age, but death is pretty much ubiquitous throughout the living world and has to be looked at as a natural and appropriate part of being alive. So why do we fear mortality? I think it's fairly obvious, but I'd like to point to a few aspects of our mortality that are frightening. For instance, we don't know how we'll die. It could be after a long illness with a lot of hospitalization and medical intervention, or it could be more sudden, such as in a motor vehicle accident or a heart attack. That uncertainty is unnerving. It leaves us feeling a little scared and frightened. Death could strike at any moment, or we might be waiting decades. We just don't know. So I've just brought in another aspect of dying that's uncertain, and that is the timing of it. So both the manner and the timing of our death are largely unknowable. Perhaps if we have a terminal diagnosis and we're getting very close to death, we begin to see how things are going to go for us. But even then, there remains a lot of uncertainty about the exact timing and manner of our departure from this body. And there's another area of uncertainty which I think frightens us, and that's this idea that while we're alive, we take up a certain place in the world. We have relationships, we have activities, we help others, etc. And then someday we'll be gone. And the question comes up, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to the people we love? What's going to happen to the world at large? What happens to our consciousness? Does it simply come to an abrupt end? Does it continue? All of this we may have strong feelings about, but we don't really know for sure. And I believe this uncertainty is part of what makes us uncomfortable with our mortality. So there's a real need for compassion as we talk about and think about the fact of our impending death. We can support ourselves by remaining kind and not, insisting that we ponder subjects that are too activating. We can take breaks. We can practice a little mindfulness where we focus on a neutral sensation, like the breath that moves in and out of our nostrils. That can be a good focus to give us a break from any upsetting feelings. And we can also seek out support from those around us. This painting by Gustav Klimt captures our situation very well, I believe. On the one hand, we have our lives, with all the intimacy, the love, the passion, the birth, the joy, and also the difficulty, the suffering, the grief, the pain. In the midst of all this passionate pageantry of life, we are shadowed by the omnipresence of our mortality. Both can be embraced, both the full power and beauty and uncertainty of life and the inevitability and finality of death. Indeed, this is the goal of this video series, to help us simultaneously be aware of that vibrant aliveness in the breathing body and our knowledge that eventually our life must come to an end. This video is the introduction to this exploration. I encourage you to view the remaining 4, which I believe will help you expand your understanding of dying and death and your comfort with it. My hope is that by the end of this series, we'll be able to embrace both the reality of life and the inevitability of death with open hearts and in a way that serves our wiser, kinder, and more compassionate approach to our daily lives. Thank you.